300E, and what we're going to do today is remove the airflow sensor in the throttle body and give it a bit of a clean. The car, when it's cold, is not really throttling too good. It's a bit flat. So I've tried everything, so this is one of the last resorts I'm going to do. And so here we go. Right, the first thing we do is pull out the fuel pump relay, which is located up here behind the ECU, which is the one just down there. And we've got to unplug that, and then I'll start and run the engine and get the fuel out of the line. And the next thing I do is disconnect the negative terminal off the battery. We don't want any sparks or anything. Now I'm undoing the fuel lines around the fuel distributor here. Undone one, and we'll carry on. Okay, I've undone these fuel lines here. I've disconnected the incoming line and the damper, and now I'll disconnect these electrical plugs around the unit, and then I'll undo these bolts holding it on. And down underneath here there's a hose. Put my finger on it there, there's a band. I undo that clip on that hose, and then hopefully be able to take the whole unit out and give it a clean. Okay, right, I've undone all the fuel lines and undone the main line coming in. I've undone the nuts, 3 nuts around it. Now the next thing is to free it so I can get it up and out. I also loosened off the injector pipes along there so these pipes can move freely. Now I'm going to try and lever the thing up and out. Well, it was a bit of a struggle to get it out. It's quite tight. Just give it a tug, in the end it'll go. As you can see, that's pretty gunky there. And here's our item here on the floor. And so what we're going to do is give it a really good clean out on the inside. That's all we're doing, is just cleaning. And then we throw it back together again. Well, I gave it a bit of a clean up. Wasn't too bad. You can see down in there, nice and shiny and clean. The main thing to check too is this rubber here. If it's got any cracks, holes or anything in it, you'll have to buy a new one. You can't have any vacuuming leaks around this part of the engine, or you can't have any on any part of the engine, but anyway, that will make your engine idle really bad and all over the place and everything. So make sure there's no cracks or holes or anything in that piece of rubber. And the plate's nice and clean on this side too, and that's a very important part of the car running. I'm going to just throw it back on now and see what happens. Well, we're now in the next day in the morning. I wanted to do a cold start on the engine. Yesterday I ran the engine and it coughed and spluttered, and once I got the fuel in it ran okay. And my main problem is acceleration after a cold start. So here we go. I'm going to turn the key and see what happens. Give it a second. Here we go. Okay, we started. Whoops, and it's idling pretty rough. So, what I'm going to do next is change the fuel accumulator. But first I'll just take it for a little drive and see how flat the accelerator is on a cold start. pretty flat. Got to build it up. It's not that bad. I'll just run it around this corner. The car's perfect when it's warmed up and running. It only needs about 40 degrees in temperature and it goes fine. So I think the accumulator is not holding the pressure that good, so I'm going to change that next. My wife and I went for a trip down Victoria the other week, and we took the 450, and so we were away for a week. Anyway, when I got home, this car, the 300E, had been sitting here all week, and it started first go. So just the fact that it started first go after sitting for a week, I doubt if it's a fuel accumulator that needs to be changed really. So what I'm going to do now is change the oxygen sensor, because that is the problem. And I'm not going to bother showing you how to change it, because I've already done a video of pulling one out before. So I'll just pull it out and take it from there. Right, I have the oxygen sensor out of the car. That's the original, and you can see it's got the different plugs on it. They're Mercedes plugs, and this is a ring-in. There was a variety of oxygen sensors. It's the same sensor actually for different cars, Audi, BMW and Fords. And the difference is the Mercedes one costs about 180 US. This one costs 40. And if you get a, say, a 1990 Ford Mustang, it's the same oxygen sensor. So what I've got to do is this one has shorter wires and than this, the original Mercedes. So what I'll do is I'll cut it about here somewhere, and I'm going to cut the plug off and join the wires. The white wires are the heater, and that wire, the black one, is the actual oxygen sensor, so there's no problem there. And the configuration on the new one is the same. So I'm just going to put cable joiners, which I'll show you in a minute. Well, I seem to have stuffed up with my camera work, but at least we have this photo here showing you a red crimp connector, which you can buy anywhere. And what I did was just crimp the wires together and tape them up, and then I put the oxygen sensor back in the car, and lo and behold, everything seemed to come back to normal again. So now I think we have to talk about this procedure of diagnosing what's wrong with your car. I must say it's not easy diagnosing problems with the electronics on these cars. All modern cars are the same, except this one's 26 years old, and but they're all still the same. The problems are things like here's a symptom: engine stalls or idles rough. In our case, we were idling rough. Now it says here it could be the coolant temperature sensor being faulty. It could be the control plunger in the fuel distributor binding, or the airflow sensor plate not being in the rest position correctly. So that's the reason we pulled off the fuel distributor and the air plate, was to make sure it's all nice and clean and everything. That cost me nothing and took under 1 hour to do. I changed the engine temperature sensor as a matter of course, I think it was one of the pins was a bit iffy anyway. And what else do we do? Oh yes, the potentiometer, because the potentiometer shows the airplate position to the electronic control unit, ECU, and it tends to wear most in the idle position. That's the most common position for it to be sitting in, obviously. And in my case, I didn't know. It's a very hard thing to test, so at 11.95 from China mailed, I changed it, and I did. Now I have a spare. But what it turned out to be in the end was the oxygen sensor. And what's it say? Oxygen sensor. When it's dirty, and we've pulled it out and cleaned it in the past, but the engine, or the ECU, the engine control unit, electrical control unit, thinks the engine is running RITs and cuts the fuel delivery, especially at idle, and that's what it turned out to be. But I tried to test it, but I've got a fluke multimeter and everything, and you've got to test your sensor wire coming out, not the heater wires, and you want 0.045 of a volt fluctuating up and down maybe to 0.05. Well, when I tried it, all I got was gibberish, and then I disconnected the heater wires off the oxygen sensor, and lo and behold, on a cold start I had throttle and everything, and that's why I changed it, and therein lies the problem. Another one is if your little limit switch for your on the throttle position where it's in the idle position, that switch does a couple of things which we won't go into, but if it's failed, it reckons here that you'll be in idle condition all the time. This will muck up your running mixture, so it's important that that switch switches too. Anyway, that's the end of this show. I hope it's not all double Dutch, because it starts to get double Dutch to me when you read over and over different things all the time. Bye.